Back tonight, and thanks for staying on. Former President Jacob Zuma will know tomorrow if he'll have to go back to jail. The Supreme Court of Appeal will hand down judgment on whether his release on medical parole last year was lawful. The Constitutional Court sentenced the former president to 15 months in jail after he defied an order to appear before the state capture inquiry. But 2 months into his sentence, former prison boss Arthur Fraser defied a decision by the Medical Parole Board and sent Zuma home, citing ill health. The Democratic Alliance and the Helen Suzman Foundation took the matter to court and won. Zuma then approached the SCA to overturn the ruling. Right, joining us now is the Jacob Zuma Foundation spokesperson, Mzwanele Manyi, to, of course, react to the latest that is coming tomorrow. Mr. Manyi, good evening, and thank you so much for your time, and thank you for giving us this opportunity. So, I believe two things will be decided. One, will be whether the medical parole was legal, but two, whether or not the High Court was correct to find that the time that Mr. Zuma spent on medical parole should not count as part of his sentence. What is your expectation of this particular court session?
Yeah, good evening, Tabo, and to your viewers. First, let's just correct something. There's no such a thing as President Zuma will know tomorrow if he's going back to jail or not. That is out of the question. And the reason that's out of the question is because he has served his full sentence. You must remember his sentence was 15 months, and he has been in 15 months under the care of the correctional services. So indeed, he has served his sentence. So tomorrow is really just for case law purposes, academic purposes. That's all that tomorrow is all about. Just to make sure that people know two things. One, that there is a difference when somebody is an inmate for under 24 months, that the DG or the commissioner is the final arbiter in a situation of somebody that is has got a 24 months or less sentence, like President Zuma. So firstly, Arthur Fraser took the decision with the right original power, with the right competence to make that decision. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it must be very clear that whether the decision is right or wrong, President Zuma is not part of it, because firstly, he did not even apply for the parole in the first instance. Didn't apply for the parole. So if the parole is granted legally or illegally, that can't be any of his business. That would be government to deal with that. That was a government process. So that was a government decision. But we think that it was the right decision in any case. Secondly, it will be clear tomorrow that Judge Matojan, in fact, misdirected himself on a number of things. Firstly, he made a decision on a redacted report. What kind of judgment is this, where a judge uses a redacted report to make life and death decisions like this? So the court tomorrow will clear, and we are hoping that it will make it clear to anybody like Matojan and others that when you are a judge and you have to make such a decision, you must have all the information in front of you. You can't, on a redacted report, make the kind of outlandish decisions or judgments that Matojan has made. Secondly, the court tomorrow will also make it clear to Matojan and others and educate them that a person in medical parole or any other parole, that person is still a prisoner. So for Matojan in the Gauteng High Court to take the view that the length of time that President Zuma spent outside the prison walls means that he was basically on holiday, that anybody that thinks that way is misdirected, is misguided. So we're hoping the court will make that clear and will educate Matojan to say that if you are on parole, you are still a prisoner. So President Zuma was a prisoner up until he was released on the 7th of October this year. So that's what we're hoping the court will do tomorrow. Yeah. And for us, then, that justice will be served.
Do you think this process would have in any way brought questions to how the medical parole process is currently being used, or one would maybe want to say in other instances abused? Does it taint the credibility of the medical parole regime in how it's being handled and how particularly former President Jacob Zuma's medical parole was processed?
Your line keeps disappearing, but
right.
the part I've heard, let me respond to it.
Okay.
You see, the only issue here is the Zuma laws, that whenever President Zuma is involved, then you must get a Zuma law. In this instance, everything happened by the book. Firstly, there was a medical assessment that was done to President Zuma by medical people that are employed by the state, not even his private doctors anywhere. Military hospital is a very prestigious hospital that deals mainly with the heads of states, people at that level. So it's actually probably even better than many of the private facilities. It's got all the facilities you can think of because it deals with heads of state. Some heads of states come from other countries to this facility. So it's a prestige medical facility. Now, if that kind of a facility makes a determination that someone has got a terminal illness, you better trust it, as it were. Now, if you had a conflicting view by somebody, by another advisory structure, and I think this must be very clear, that the only people that had a different way, another advisory structure, and the confusion in the media space out there is that this advisory panel was like a final arbiter, and as if Fraser has defied a final arbiter. I want to clear it here and now that advisory structure was nothing else but an advisory structure. An advisory structure has got no executive authority. They just advised. It was still up to Arthur Fraser to take everything into consideration and make a decision. And he has done exactly that. He took what they said, which they differed with the others, but it was up to him as the commissioner, because the inmate was in there for a period of less than 24 months. So the executive authority lied with Arthur Fraser, who was a commissioner at the time. So he acted within the law. He acted using the original powers given to him by the law. It's just that when it's President Zuma, then everything must be thought of to be wrong and all of that. This is just a hatred people have of an 8-year-old man. I don't know why.
The whole point of having the medical advisory board, then, seemingly, if it is going to be taken, as you're saying, just an advisory board, is pointless. I mean, why would the minister would have introduced an advisory board to particularly comment and review some of the medical parole decisions that are being taken?
Yeah, well, look, advisors are like that. Not only our line is terrible, so I might just look. I'm not for questions, but the issue here is that generically, I've been an advisor myself. I know that I would do hard work for a minister, but a minister would decide whether or not to use my well-researched position. So I think all advisors must not have egos, must know that they are nothing else but advisors. So when you're an advisor, you must never ever think that must be a final say. The person that must take accountability for the decision is the person that must make the final call. And in fact, even the question you're asking there, Tabu, just look at it in other instances. Here is Ramaphosa, which you've never asked this question. Ramaphosa himself was advised by the JSC who to appoint for Chief Justice. And in fact, in that case, it was even worse because there were a whole range of panel interviews, scoring and all of that. And the person that scored the highest, according to legal eagles, including judges and advocates, Ramaphosa decided, no, he's going to take someone that performed the least. And because it was his executive authority to exercise. Why is it that when Ramaphosa ignores the advice of such a body, that it's a non-issue, but when Fraser does something similar, it's a big issue? I think we must get rid of hypocrisy in South Africa.
So your view is that the decisions of the medical parole board does not give effect to what should happen to the inmate, but rather advises the DG, and the DG has that option to then ignore them or actually make a decision contrary to what they're saying?
Yeah, look, I think you must differentiate between these panels. There is a panel that there is a panel that does these kinds of decisions on cases that are 24 months and more. So that panel is the one that you are giving this other panel a power to. That panel of 24 months plus is a panel whose decision should not be overturned, as it were. It's not advisory. It's, I just forgot the proper name, but it's that a parole board. Actually, yeah, that's what it is, a parole board. So this one is not like your parole board. It's your advisory panel. It's the tools which the decision maker uses to fine-tune his decision. He said, what do you say? Why are you saying that? And all of that. It's just one of the tools that are being used. So Arthur Fraser had two tools in front of him. The one tool was the advisory panel. The other tool was the medical doctors that made well-informed decisions. These are the people that actually worked on President Zuma. They did all the tests. They did all the diagnosis and everything. So he had that versus the people that were doing a desktop analysis, and he had that to choose from. So he chose the ones that actually did the actual examination and all of that. He weighted that, and that was just one of the considerations. There were other considerations as well that to take into account. So Arthur Fraser took all of that into account and he made the decision. So his decision was above board.
But were they a part of the Department of Correctional Services medical personnel who, according to the Act, are the ones who should start the process of applying for medical parole?
Yes, that's what happened. You must remember where the process started. It started with the medical people at the correctional services itself. That's where the process started. It didn't just start anywhere. Medical people that do routine checks on inmates at the hospital, at the jail. That's where it started, and then it went further to the military hospital to do even much more sophisticated analysis and all of that. So all of this was within the medical fraternity, and all these medical fraternity people were all at one that this is the situation, you know. So then you have this other advisory team that came and shuffled the paperwork and looked at paperwork, and based on paperwork, without even examining President Zuma, just based on paperwork, they said, no, he's not sick. They did not, I can tell you this for a fact, those people did not examine President Zuma. They just looked at desktop and they made decision on a desktop, and there's no way that a decision on a desktop can weigh more than a decision of people that actually did the examination. So this is what we're dealing with here. So the decision was by medical people in the main. So Arthur Fraser pronounced on it, but actually the decision and the motivation was done by medical people, highly qualified people that treat heads of states.
Mr. Manyi, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on and that clarity for us tonight. That is the spokesperson for the Jacob Zuma Foundation there, Mzwanele Manyi.